Because Spain did not participate in any of the world wars and was a second or a third-rate power, many people do not consider tanks in the context of Spain. Nevertheless, Spain was not absent from conflict, and, as such, experimented with armor designs. One of the most outstanding was Spain's first tank, the Trubia Serie A, perhaps a bit infamous for its unusual turret design. Welcome to another Tank Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm your host, Dan, and today I'll be covering the Trubia Serie A. If you like what we do, remember to subscribe and click the bell button so you don't miss a single video. If you want to contribute more directly and help us to produce more content, consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. Spain has mainly depended on foreign technology for its tank forces, but there have always been enthusiastic engineers, military commanders, and policymakers who have wanted to break the mold and create indigenous designs. The first of these initiatives would take place in 1925 in the northern town of Trubia, Asturias. Following the satisfactory completion of a prototype, plans were put in motion to design an improved serial production tank which would be known as the Modelo Trubia Serie A, or Trubia Tank Series A, for short. Colonial competition and internal politics meant that Spain took possession of large areas of what is today Morocco. The locals loathed the Spanish colonial administrators, leading to the Rif War from 1911 to 1927. There, Spain would use for the first time in its history the modern technology of aircraft, armored cars, and tanks. The Spanish bought 11 Renault FTs and 6 Schneider CA1s, which would take part in multiple actions throughout the war with mixed results. The main shortcomings found in the Renault FT, regarded by the Spanish as the finest tank, were poor performance, speed, range of operation due to a poor engine, and its vulnerability when its only machine gun jammed. To overcome these, a team involving Commander Victor Landes Dominic, an artillery officer attached to the Trubia Arms Factory, Captain Carlos Ruiz de Toledo, a tank commander during the first engagements during the Rif War, and the Trubia Arms Factory's chief engineer, Rogelio Areces, took it upon themselves to design and build a superior vehicle for the Spanish army. This resulted in the Trubia prototype, which was satisfactorily tested in 1926. A budget was set for the creation of a tank-producing workshop at the Trubia factory, and a commission was established to travel Europe and investigate tank technological innovations that they could use to improve serial versions of the prototype. Appearance-wise, the tank resembled the Renault FT, with a few differences. Areces and Ruiz de Toledo's European adventure would not be as fruitful as they may have hoped and expected. Tank technology was in its infancy, and most tank-producing nations were wary of sharing their findings, and the technology they did share was mostly outdated. Allegedly, in Germany, they were shown a very peculiar suspension inspired by the one intended to be used on the K-Wagen Behemoth. However, although the K-Wagen suspension was unsprung, the vehicle or suspension system they were shown was probably from or inspired by the earlier Orion wagon. This undercarriage system was named Orion, and was supposed to improve upon traditional systems in order to enhance turning capabilities and minimize the effects on roads. In this integrated track design, the links were suspended from the chassis and held together by a lateral metal wall. This system was designed to prevent the tracks from coming off when maneuvering. It is possible that the vehicle the commission was shown was a totally different vehicle. In 1926, a Leipzig-based firm tested the differences between a suspended and non-suspended track chassis. When considering a suspension for this vehicle and the Trubia Serie A, the visual similarities are uncanny. Satisfied with what they saw, the Commission bought at least 4 Orion systems and Daimler 4-cylinder 75-horsepower engines for the tank series. In this next section, we'll tell you about the Trubia Serie A's design. The square-shaped central hull housed the crew compartment. The back resembled that of an FT, rear tail included. On the center right of the front were 2 boxes. The most central and smaller one had a vision slit for the driver, whilst the larger one on the right hand had a forward-firing machine gun. This position was a detachable piece which allowed the crew to enter and access the tank. At the very front was a removable, small, semicircular plate which acted as a ram to break through obstacles, such as walls and barbed wire. The side and frontal armor was 20 millimeters, or 0.79 inches, thick. One of the tank's most recognizable features, the turret was made out of 2 overlapping turrets with independent movement, and each armed with a Hotchkiss 7mm machine gun. The tank's armament consisted of 3 7mm Hotchkiss M1914 machine guns. Each turret had one operated by 2 different gunners, one of whom was also the commander. The gunners would have to load their own weapons. The third was at the front and operated by the driver. The machine gun was a stopgap solution, and it was planned to fit a 40mm infantry gun into the lower turret, though these never materialized. The sides of the tank were also pierced with small loopholes through which the crew could fire. Additionally, the first series production vehicle had a ball joint on the right side for a Mauser rifle. The engine was one of the ones the Commission found in Germany, the Daimler MV1574 four-cylinder engine developing 75 horsepower. The aim was to surpass the Renault FT's limited range and speed. The tank was capable of traveling at 30 km per hour, or 18.65 miles per hour, with a range of 100 kilometers, or 62.14 miles, a slight improvement over the Renault FT. The fuel tank held 180 liters. After their construction was rushed by demands coming from Madrid, 4 vehicles were finished in 1926 as part of a pre-production series. This meant that as soon as they were finished, they were transported by train to Madrid. One, most likely the last one, was not even finished, and a small workshop next to the train station in Madrid had to be hired to finish the vehicle off before it joined the other 3 for testing. The vehicles had not been properly factory tested, and a group of factory workers were sent along with the tanks to make sure everything ran smoothly. The testing of the 4 tanks would garner lots of interest, and many officials would visit during the long, demanding tests they were subjected to. These tests included cross-country travel, obstacle demolition, overcoming gradients, pulling heavy artillery, and protection. The tests judged the tank to have some pros and some cons, mainly regarding the undercarriage, and offered some recommendations. The accompanying factory workers carried out multiple repairs during the tests and made notes of what went wrong. The 4 tanks were taken back to Trubia by train to be disassembled, and at least one was modified with the recommendations in mind. A modified tank was tested in the factory grounds. During these tests, the vehicle lacked the detachable frontal boxes, the ram piece, and the machine guns. This vehicle was later sent to Madrid in May 1928 for a second round of testing. The results were judged satisfactory, and the tank would be given a number plate and was incorporated into the Army. The commission in charge of supervising the tests concluded a report that the Trubia light tank had all the required capabilities of a tank of its nature. However, no more Trubia Serie A's would be built, as conflict within the Spanish military and the government led to the disbandment of the artillery wing of the armed forces. The artillery had been, up to then, responsible for the production of the Trubia tanks, and without their budget and blessing, the project was all but dead. Nevertheless, the Trubia Serie A would see some very limited service. Following a revolution in Asturias, the region where the Trubia factory was, in October 1934, the 3 Trubia Serie A's, which had been left unmodified following the Madrid trials of 1926, were put back into service with a series of modifications. They were incorporated into the light infantry of Oviedo, the capital of Asturias. The vehicles were in poor condition, but there were plans to continue to carry out tests on them. The 4th vehicle remained in the factory. The failed general's coup which drew Spain into a bloody civil war in 1936 gave the Trubia Serie A's their chance to prove themselves in combat for the first time, 10 years after they had left the factory. The Trubia factory remained loyal to the Spanish government forces, the Republicans. The factory's Trubia Serie A was first used in an offensive against Oviedo on September 10, 1936. It broke down in no man's land outside the city, Efforts were made to recover the tanks, but this was not possible until October. No more is known of the fate of the Republican Serie A, and it was possibly scrapped. To most people's surprise, given Oviedo's left-wing history, the coup there was successful and the city would be the only main city in central northern Spain to join the nascent nationalist forces. This included the 3 Trubias in the local infantry regiment. They were most likely used to quell the first attacks by militias on the city and helped consolidate nationalist control of it. On August 22, 1936, the 3 Trubia Serie A's were used offensively against objectives on the road to Trubia. Here, tank number 2 broke down. The vehicle was towed back during the night, but, because of the general poor condition of the tank and the unevenness of the ground, the turret fell off. It is unknown if the turret was put back on, but the vehicle remained in service. Following this small offensive, the vehicles were to be deployed defensively in the besieged city of Oviedo. Multiple further breakdowns meant that they were used statically in defensive positions. One was destroyed at some point before the end of the initial Republican offensive in Asturias in October 1936. Nationalist forces destroyed it to prevent the enemy from capturing it, as it had broken down and could not be towed to safety. The remaining 2 Trubia Serie A's continued to be used for defensive duties. On October 27th, tank number 3 was sent to a hill near Oviedo to tow a Republican tank that had broken through the lines but had broken down. In January 1937, the 2 remaining Trubia Serie A and Nationalist infantry managed to fend off a major Republican offensive on the city. It is unknown if the 2 tanks survived the whole offensive, but they were most likely scrapped once the offensive was over and plenty more modern and suitable German Panzer Is and Italian CV-33-35s and captured Soviet vehicles were available. The Trubia Serie A was a brave, but ultimately unsatisfactory effort to improve upon the existing Renault FT. Had the vehicle worked properly, it would have definitely been a major improvement. It had superior firepower, improved engine performance, an engine that could be accessed from the inside, and it allowed for higher speed, range, and performance, slightly thicker armor, and more comfort for its crew. However, the experimental suspension system used proved to be inefficient and too prone to breakdowns due to its delicate nature. Regardless, the Trubia Serie A was the first example of a Spanish-designed tank to overcome the dependency on foreign tanks, and valuable lessons were learnt by the designers and engineers. Although none of the original vehicles remain, in the Museo de la Historia Militar Española, El Tueto, in Asturias, along its impressive collection of Spanish Civil War-era reconstructions, is one of the Trubia Serie A. Whilst due to its complexity and obsolescence the Orion suspension systems had not been replicated, everything else seems to be an accurate reproduction of the vehicle, including the double-rotating turret. The vehicle has been given an engine and is used to drive around the museum's grounds. This concludes our look at the Spanish Trubia Serie A. If you like what we do and want to see more, remember to subscribe so that you don't miss a single video. If you want to contribute more directly, consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. Until next time, keep us in your sights.